This is the instructional video for the expressive type project in the beginning typography course. In this video, I'll go over how to use the template, how to make some of the modifications that we're looking for, and also point out some of the do's and don'ts of this assignment. So here I have it open. First thing I'm going to do is go ahead and save this assignment. So I'll come into File, Save As, and I'll save S. Bacon, first initial, last name, underscore, expressive words. All right, click Save, click OK. When you open the file, you might also have a 9 slicing error message appear, and you're welcome to just click past that. So here we have this. So at this point, you should have done all of your sketching. We've gone through the 10 words. We've distilled them down into the 6 concepts that we want to explore in the computer. The first thing we need to do is make sure that we have the correct typefaces. We're only really allowed to work with the certain ones that are outlined on the assignment sheet. So you should have those on your computer already, but if for some reason you don't, go ahead and open them up in your OS, and then if you double click on them, this will allow you to install them on your computer. They may appear as multiple windows or they may appear as just one, but once you click install, they'll go ahead and open them up in whatever your OS font installation program is, and they should appear. You may need to restart Illustrator, but they should appear there once you're there. I'm not going to click install font because I already have this typeface installed, but that is the process that you would go through. So once we're in here, then we can actually start working through our words. So maybe you have some sketches that you need to work out. I'll show some of the things that I might do in Illustrator that would help you execute them. First thing is we'll click on the type tool, and that'll allow us to draw boxes where we can put type. So maybe I'm working with the word drip. I'm going to go ahead and type that out. I'm going to make it larger, and then I'm going to go ahead and put it in Avenir. I like this heavyweight. So that's one thing we might want to explore from the get-go. Obviously, we can increase the size. That's something we can do in Illustrator. We can also change the weight. Maybe part of your concept is that some of these are going to be lighter or not as heavy as the other ones. Maybe that relates to what you're doing. You're welcome to use any of those weights. That's something that you can explore. You're also welcome to potentially play with outlining some of these forms. So if you want to do that, that can be something that you can explore as well. So that's just by highlighting these letters, and then you can use this little toggle, which will switch back and forth and allow you to make something filled or outlined. I would avoid changing the stroke to very heavy things. It may distract from what you're doing, but if you have the right concept, it also could work. I also would avoid this altogether. Do not use any of these other types of strokes. Other things that we do want to avoid is really stretching type. So one thing we might want to do is actually outline the typography. So if we come up here to type and we go to create outlines, it'll no longer allow the type to be actually keyable. So you'll notice I can't change this. If I undo and I go back, I'm able to still type other things in here. But once we outline the type, that's no longer possible. So depending on what you're doing, you may even want to create a copy. And sometimes I do that by just holding down the Option key and clicking and dragging to create another one. So I'm going to go ahead and go back and outline this, type, create outlines. And now what I'm able to do if I zoom in is now I'm able to really modify the type. So if I click inside, so I double click, I'm able to select individual letters, and then I could always cut them and then double click so it's out, and then I can paste in front so that I can move this isolated from the rest. Another way to do that is to select the hollow arrow tool, and you can just select whatever letter you want. So you can isolate that by just using that one tool to get the points that you want. So this can be a way to move certain portions of letter forms. It's particularly useful when we do things where we want to pull down descenders. So things like this, where you want to elongate certain shapes, that can be something that's really handy. Because if you look, I'm only selecting these points. The rest of these are still hollow. They're white. So that's the trick. If I come in here and I select just these two, I'm able to then stretch this out and move things where I want them to be. And these are ways to make proportional adjustments to these letter forms. What we want to avoid is things like this, where we're stretching letters. As much as possible, we don't want to be doing that. That's not the correct way to really be modifying the typography, and you'll lose a lot of points on this assignment if you do things like that. Another thing that we could do is we could also play with breaking up letter forms. So there's a couple different ways to do that. Once this is outlined, I could potentially go in and use the scissor tool to break these in certain places. So the scissor tool lives up here underneath the eraser. It's also C as the shortcut. And what the scissor tool does, if I zoom in here using Command plus, anywhere I press, it'll actually make a cut. So it'll actually cut and allow me to spread this apart. So this is no longer just one point. If I go in and select one of them and I move it, you'll see that it's actually two. And then what I could do potentially is I could draw a guide. So I need to turn on the rulers to do that. So if I go to View and I ask for the rulers, Show Rulers, I can pull down by clicking and dragging a guideline. So maybe I want to place it here so that I can make another cut directly across from the other one. And what's useful about that is then I can move this piece. Whoops. You'll see that I'm able to actually move these things and create a split between these letter forms. So maybe that's a part of your concept. You want to kind of cut these things apart or split these letter forms up. Another way you could do that is to use the Pathfinder tool. So it's an interesting set of tools that allow you to manipulate shapes. So I'll show an example. If I go ahead and over here and I change this to be the fill of white, and then I draw a rectangle over this R. And then if I select both of these shapes, oops, I need to first copy and paste this out so it's by itself. So I'm going to go ahead and go back and cut that. This is what I showed earlier. Click out and then paste in front. And then I need to arrange this. So now I'm going to bring this back on top because I need to see that cut happening. So I'm going to go to Object, Arrange, Bring to Front. So now if I select both of these, you'll notice that it actually pops up here on its own, the Pathfinder. But you can also find it by coming up here and going to the Pathfinder menu. It has its own menu. Now these can be a little tricky sometimes, but if you just look at what they look like, it sometimes really helps you figure out what's going to happen. So I know for this one I want minus front. So if I do this, it's actually going to split this now into two separate pieces. And again, if I go and use the hollow arrow tool, I can actually select just part of it if that's what I want. So that could be a really powerful, useful tool. Obviously, you can always get away too sometimes with just laying white boxes on top of things because it will indicate or imply those kinds of cuts if that's what you're trying to make. We want to avoid using extra shapes as much as possible, but obviously in Illustrator there's a fair amount of shape tools that you can explore. So they're all over here. There's the rectangle that's usually on top. If you hold down Shift, it'll make a perfect square. Then there's also the rounded rectangle tool, the ellipse tool. That will actually create a circle if you hold down Shift as you're making it. Then there's also the polygon and star tool. With either of those, if you double click, it'll actually let you determine how many sides you want it to be. So that can be useful if you're trying to determine a certain number of sides. But again, we're trying to avoid using a lot of other shapes. We mostly want to focus on these types of modifications that I was discussing here. Other things you may want to explore are just, the spacing of these letter forms. Potentially your concept is really about the way that these things are spaced. So by really allowing yourself to isolate these letters and split them up, you're really going to be able to create, more variety as you space and move these things around. The other thing is we want to actually create these within the context of these frames. That's really where these compositions need to live. So once you have them figured out or getting close, you may want to go ahead and get them in here so that you can start looking at how they fit within the context of the space. We really want to avoid things being too big and getting too close to the edges, and we want to also have it be really intentional. Sometimes some of your concepts might really rely on the frame or the placement of the type within the frame to make them work. So if you ever are doing something where these are going to bleed outside, we'll also need to go over another concept here, which is masking. So first I need to ungroup all of these boxes. They're all grouped together right now. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Object, and I'm going to ungroup. This is a way to allow you to treat multiple objects as one thing. But I need this frame, so I'm going to select it, and I'm going to go ahead and copy it and paste it on top because I need two of them. So I'm going to go to Edit, Copy, and then I'm going to go to Paste in Front. So now I have two frames. Now just for good measure, I'm going to select this, and I'm going to go to Object, Arrange, and bring it to front, just so I know it's on top of everything. Now I'm seeing now that it's solid. I actually don't want that. So I'm going to click here to create none, which will actually have it no longer be filled. Now since this is the only thing that's hanging off, I could just mask this one thing, but just to show an example, I'm going to select these things together so we can mask them all at once. So once I select everything, I'm going to go up to Object, Group, and then I'm going to go ahead and select this frame. So now I have the grouped objects in the frame selected together, and then I'm going to go to Clipping Mask Make. So I've gone over this before, but that's a useful thing. The two frames are important because it allows the frame to still exist. But that's the process you'll need to go through if you're trying to contain things within these shapes. The other important things are to fill in the name layer. So you'll want to actually come in here and type on this layer and type in your first and last name. So that's really important for when you turn it in. We also need to fill in these terms, so each of them are ready for you. Don't change the font if you don't have to. Please keep it standard. If you need to make it Avenir or Helvetica or any typeface that you're allowed to use, that's fine. But keep them light and simple like this. We don't want them large. And then you'll eventually have 6 in here. And once you have all of those available to you, you'll want to go ahead and save. Because we ultimately want to create a PDF that'll go on Blackboard, but we want to make sure we keep this Illustrator file as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a Save As. And I'm going to save another file that will actually be a PDF. So I'm going to come down here and click Adobe PDF. I'm going to click Save. And then since this is going up on Blackboard, it's fine to just have smallest file size. If this was something we were printed, we might want to have a different setting, such as high quality print. But this is perfect. I'll click Save PDF. That's going to allow me to save a PDF that I can post to turn in. So hopefully that gets you started here, shows you how to work through this project. If you have any questions at all, please get in touch with your instructor, and good luck.